Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar organized by the Italian Cultural Institute of New York. My name is Paolo Barlera. I'm the interim director of the Institute. This evening, we're going to talk about sustainability in two important and iconic workplaces, a farm and a factory. Let me thank and introduce our guests, Maria Teresa Cometto, Isabella Rossellini, and Maureen Kline. Before turning to them, we're also privileged to have with us the Consul General of Italy, Francesco Genuardi, and I'm going to leave the screen to him for a brief greetings. Francesco.
Grazie Paolo. Sì, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here, even if we're just digitally connected. I think that it's a great event. I wanted to congratulate Paolo and the Istituto di Cultura for this new set of conversations on sustainability and innovation. The choice couldn't be better. Today is Earth Day. Buona giornata della terra a tutti. Happy Earth Day, everybody. And this new cycle of conversation moderated by brilliant Maria Teresa Cometto, I think will really highlight once more how much Italy is at the forefront of creativity and also of sustainability. And your two distinguished guests of today, Isabella. Hi, Isabella from
Ciao, Francesco.
From your fantastic farm in Long Island, and that represent the F of farm, and the F of factory represented by Maureen Kline with Pirelli. I think it's a great opportunity to remind everybody that the colors of the Italian flag start with the green. And I think this is not a coincidence. Grazie a tutti, viva l'Italia e buona conversazione. I'm sure that
Thank you, Francesco. Grazie for your welcome.
Thank you, Francesco.
Grazie, thank you so much, Consul General. Thank you, Director Paolo Barlera, and thank you to my guests, Isabella Rossellini and Maureen Kline. So the farm is a very special one because it is owned and run by famous fashion model, actress, director, creator of many interesting projects, Isabella Rossellini. I know, Isabella, that you are very busy and you can stay with us only until 6:40. So the first part of our conversation will focus only on you and your farm. First of all, why and when did you decide to own and run a farm?
Well, I always say it was ignorance and optimism that brought me to run a farm. I always loved animals. I always liked to be in the country since I was a little girl. And I had a house, a second home, because I lived in Manhattan. And I had a second home in Long Island, in a little village called Bellport, for over 40 years. And 10 years ago, there was a piece of land, about 40 acres, where we used to take walks into the woods, take our dogs, that belonged to the Marist brothers, and it was for sale, and was bought first by a developer that was going to build 12 homes. And we were all very heartbroken because that was, in Long Island, there is a great density of people. It's a very desirable place to come. And so land is it's disappearing. Everybody is buying 1 acre and build a home, another acre and build another house. So there was this contingent, 40 acres. The developer became discouraged at a certain point. And so I bought it. And with the help of the Peconic Land Trust, and great optimism and ignorance, I thought I could start a farm. Like the farm that we've seen in Italy. In Italy, when I was a little girl, it was full of family-run farm, small artisanal farm that were a pleasure. We used to go from one to the others, buy the cheese there, buy the eggs over there, the milk over there. And it was an incredible tradition. I loved it as a child. The quality of food was something that had disappeared in the big industry. So the idea that I could retire by owning a farm and recreating a farm the way I've seen it in Italy when I was a little girl seemed to me something that would entertain myself as I become older and I haven't been working as much. I didn't know that it was so difficult, that running a farm requires an incredible culture in agriculture, science, physically incredibly demanding. But I've learned a lot in 10 years, and it's really been a lab. But the most incredible thing is that the effect that he had on our little village. I didn't know that a farm can be a catalyst for a community to come together, for mothers to bring their children, to show eggs come from a chicken. Here's a chicken. Carrots look like this. This is the season of the carrot. This is the season of potatoes. So we have become very involved with the community, and it's very touching.
Yeah, your farm is called the Mama Farm, right?
Yes, we came up with the name. My daughter my daughter was always interested in food. She started as a model, as I did, and models, as you know, they have to be thin. So one of the big problems that models have is how to eat but remain thin. And Elettra started to write a column for American Vogue, the fashion magazine. And that led her more and more to be interested in food, health food. And then she worked for a magazine called Refinery 29. That was one of the biggest magazine online. She ran the food department. She wrote a book about food and recipes. And when I started the farm, she lived in Brooklyn. She came with her little son because it's really hard to live in New York when you have a little child and 2 dogs. She said, I can't push the stroller, walk the dog, cross the street. Can I come, Mama, and stay with you for 6 months until the baby is a little bit older? And now the baby is 2.5, and she hasn't left. And she took a great interest in the farm, which is very much up her alley. So I work with her now so what we create, we have vegetables that are done by a chef, a woman chef, Patty Gentry, turned farmer. She rents 4 acres of my farms. Her little business is called Early Girl Farm. She does the most incredible vegetable. I run the chicken because I like animals. So I do the chickens, ducks, and bees. And we have about 50 families that become member of the family. And they can access the farm, not only for walks, picnics, and all this, but also to buy shares of what we produce. Recently, with the COVID-19, we also give 10% of the proceeds to the farm to the school, because the schools are closed, but they're still continuing the food, the distribution of food. So we have a very strong presence in the community.
Yeah, you mentioned that you need also a lot of science to run the factory, and indeed you recently earned a master's degree in animal behavior and conservation. Why did you decide?
Well, I was always interested in animals since I was a little girl, and I read. My dad gave me, when I was about 14 years old, a wonderful book called King Solomon's Ring by Konrad Lorenz, who is a Nobel Prize winner, who's the founder of the animal behavioral science. Konrad Lorenz observed animal, did experiment to really understand their behavior. And maybe the person who's most known to have developed the science of animal behavior is Jane Goodall, with her study in the chimpanzee in Tanzania. At the time when I was at the right age to go to university, they didn't have an animal behavior degree. It's kind of a new science. There was zoology, there was agriculture. I thought about going to agricultural school in Italy because I always had this passion for, but at the time in Italy, people were leaving the small farms. They became economically not viable. And the big industry of food was taking hold of the food distribution. And so I was discouraged. People said, we want to be a farm. You want to, why? Everybody's leaving the country. Why would you want to go there? So I stayed in the family business, always with a keen interest in animals. And then I used to go to conferences to talk about animal. And in one of these conferences, a fantastic woman called Temple Graydon, She's an incredible person because she's autistic, but she's a genius of animal behavior. And she designs most of the slaughterhouse in America. About 50% of the slaughterhouse in America are designed by her because she understands how to design something that the animal don't panic. So in her slaughterhouse, they don't have to probe the animals with electric shocks to make them walk toward, you know, she designed places where the animal stayed quite calm. And so I know it's a contradiction in terms to say somebody who is an incredible person for the animal welfare, creating slaughterhouses, but in fact they go together. Temple Grayson has been a hero of people that look after animals. There is, if people are interested in her, because she's quite a character, there is a film that with Claire Danes that HBO produced. So I went to hear a lecture of Temple Grayson across the street from the Italian Cultural Institute, Hunter College. And Hunter College was handing out a pamphlet saying we just opened a new department of animal behavior. And that was what I always wanted to do all my life. So I signed up at 60 and joined and have, you know, graduated with my master's degree on animal behavior and conservation. So it was very useful to have it, and having the farm and having, although we, you know, most of the time they study wild animals and conservation, but still, even my farm, the way we designed the layout of the farm, the way we designed a portion of the land to connect with other open spaces in Long Island for the wildlife, so they can have corridors and connect to all the national park and the reserves. I owe that to the school. I owe that to Hunter College and my professors. So when I designed the farm, I feel it's a very modern farm that takes into consideration many aspects, including wildlife.
Yeah, talking about animals, I know that you raise not only chickens, but also other kind of animals, and especially...
I have to open the door to my dogs. They are all barking.
Okay.
My real job, I always say my real job is to be a dog concierge. I open and close the door all the time for them.
Yeah, I was saying that you raise other animals, and especially rare and the heritage breeds. Can you explain why?
Why? One of the things I didn't know is that there is a lot of farm animals that are endangered. The big industry has favored one type of animal, as we have favored. Same thing happened with the vegetable, and people are more familiar with the problem with the vegetable. When you go to the supermarket, you find one type of asparagus, one type of spinach. But of course, there are many species of spinaches and many species of tomatoes and many species of asparagus. But the one that has been selected by the big industries, maybe the one that has a long shelf life, that doesn't bruise in transportation. So as the small organic farm can work with heirlooms. Heirloom is the name that we give to seeds that are ancient, they are older, they are slightly different, and maybe they are tomatoes that you have to eat right away as soon as you take them from the plant because they don't have a very long shelf life. So you need to sell right away to your client. So you need this kind of operation of a small farm serving the local community. The same thing happens with the farm animals. Chickens, there is 19 billion chickens a year that are slaughtered. So they're not endangered as a species, but the breeds are endangered. There's many breeds of different chickens, as we have dogs that are a bulldog, a Labrador, a poodle, a Pekingese. So there are breeds of chickens, and the breeds of chickens are endangered. So it would be as if we would decide, okay, we just have dogs, Labrador, but you would lose the talent of a herding dog, you would lose the talent of a hunting dog, you would lose the talent of a guard dog, because all these dogs have been selected to have, first for talent, now maybe we select them for looks, so we want a dog that has certain patches, something cute, but the same thing happens with all the farm animals. So at my farm, I have heritage breed. Heritage breed of animal means the same word that heirloom. One is used for vegetable and the other one is used for animals.
Yeah, and why is it so important, biodiversity?
Biodiversity is very important, and I think there is a role for a small farm like mine, not only to serve the community, but also to maintain biodiversity. biodiversity, if you read, for example, that has been a collection of all the seeds that are now in a bank up in the North Pole in Norway, because the industry favors one type of vegetable, one type, not of vegetable, or let's say of corn. You can find one or two type of corn at the supermarket. But let's say you have a coronavirus of the vegetable, and that coronavirus of the vegetable might kill or compromise that production. The only way you can have corn is by going to another breed who might be resistant to that virus. So the biodiversity guarantees the survival of the species. You can have a disease. I mean, we've seen in farming mad cow disease, the avian flu, where you have to slaughter many, many animals because they've been contaminated. Because all these animals, there are many, but they are the same. They are genetically the same. There is no differentiation. We need the biodiversity to guarantee the healthiness of a species.
Right. Talking about chickens, I understand that you love, especially chickens, that have quite a bad reputation of being dumb. Indeed, in Italian, for example, we have a saying, avere il cervello da gallina, to have the brains of a chicken, meaning to be not too smart.
Right.
So, sorry, I wanted to tell our audience that you wrote a beautiful book, My Chickens and I, that is very informative and funny also. So why do you love chickens?
Well, chickens traditionally have been an animals that was raised by women. Other animals, sometimes they were raised by women too, but other animals, you need a certain amount of strength. If you have to control a ram or a billy, you have to kind of stride them and hold them by the horns. And they're not easy. Chickens are very easy. And I think, and they live around the house. They don't move very much. They stay around their coop. So they're easy to handle. And I think they were traditionally animals that women kept, even grandmothers, because they don't really demand much, and they have delicious eggs. You don't have to eat them if you want to be vegetarian. They have eggs. They lay eggs almost every day. Now they want to come back. I'm sorry about that.
I take the opportunity to tell everybody in the audience, first of all, thank you for joining us, for following us. You can send your questions through the chat on Zoom and also on the page of Facebook. Okay, welcome back, Isabella.
And so chickens are easy, and I have a very bad back. And when I selected the animals, I thought that it would be important to have animals that I can handle, that I don't have to, have to use a physical strength like it would be with like a cow, or, if you have to lift up a baby cow or something. So I selected bees and chickens. I was very ignorant because bees, actually, the beehives can be incredibly heavy and you need to be incredibly strong. Although, and you don't want to touch the bees, so was part of my ignorance. But we do produce honey, and honey, of course, is very important to continue to produce because somehow bees there is enormous mortalities of bees. It's called, as everybody knows. So it's very important to keep them alive until we find what is killing them.
Yeah, one question already from the audience. Paula asked if the farm is visitable from by anybody.
So I cannot have a farm that is open like a national park, or because that would need to have insurances and security and staff, and I cannot afford it. But we create many, many events at the Mama Farm. We have brunches. We present the food. We have chefs that come and cook for us and explain how to prepare certain seasonal vegetables. We have screenings of silent movies, sometimes with talking about nature, sometimes just movies, because I love silent movies. We have events for children. So we do have several events that are open to the audience, so that we sell tickets and people come. what we do, we have about 50 members of local families, about 50 families that they pay a membership to the farm, and we give them what the farm produces. Right now we can serve 50 people. Maybe we can do a little bit more, because Patty, that did the vegetable, last year served restaurants, but of course now all the restaurants are closed. So she lost her clients so there is an excess of vegetables that can be sold. So if you go to Mama, M-A-M-A farm.com, you can get the information.
Yeah. So you mentioned the fact that it is pretty difficult and challenging running a small organic farm like yours. Can this kind of farm become financially independent, sustainable?
That is the biggest bet, you know. This is exactly the biggest bet. I say, if I solve that problem, I would have solved the problem. I think it's very important to maintain it. And again, not only is it important for biodiversity, it's an incredible way. It's almost like giving to your neighborhood Central Park. As much as we love Central Park in the city, it would be Central Park will also have a little farm, and you can show the children so much knowledge about where the food comes from. It has to be maintained because it's so precious. Right now it is financed basically by me, by my acting. And the biggest bet is to try to make it financially independent. I bought a house next to the farm, adjacent to the farm, where we're going to create a little bed and breakfast. And this is also to support the farm. Not everybody can do that. Sometimes there is no houses that can be transformed in a bed and breakfast. I don't know that a bed and breakfast will be very lucrative. We don't know yet. It's one of the biggest problems of all the artisanal farm, how to survive. Although, when I speak to friends, like I'm friendly with a man who has Fresh Direct, he says that the food that he sells that is growing, Fresh Direct is a distributor of food. You go online and, for example, you want to buy salmon, and he will give you the category of salmon, wild caught in Alaska, that is considered, a place safe, not only also they respect the law, the environmental law. This salmon is farm raised, and this one is, it gives you and then the different price. And you choose according to what you want. If you are a big environmentalist, you might choose a salmon, of course, might be more expensive. You might eat it once a month, but you buy one that it is wild caught from a country that follows the environmental laws. He tells me that the business in Fresh Direct that grows the most is the organic food, that there is an increased demand of organic food. So I hope so, so that we can provide it. We don't have lack of clients. The biggest thing is to find, you have to have a lot of workers in a farm. And so the overheads are enormous.
Yeah, I am a big customer of Fresh Direct, so I.
Oh, really? Yes,
Yeah.
well, he has a house in Belport, David, who runs it, who's the CEO.
A question from Loredana. Some people say that it is cruel of humans to take honey away from the bees. What do you think of that?
Well, it's like all domestic animals. If we wouldn't have bees. So we rob them of the honey. So what I do, in August, I go and take half of the honey they produced. Half of the honey, of course, I leave it there so they can survive in the winter. But I also do other things for them. I provide them the real estate because we give them the already made, I provide food. I help them because they have pests and they have diseases and they have wasps that come and try to attack them. So we help them as we would, it's interesting to work with bees because while the chicken is a domesticated animal, meaning that the cousin of the chicken, the wild cousin of the chicken is quite different from the chicken that we have today. The bees, although they have been domesticated, they all come from, for example, the Mediterranean, and we have them in New York State or all the way to Alaska. So they have been habituated to a colder weather. They have changed some to the original bees. But if we weren't there to help them survive, they would die. Would they live only in Italy? Well, now they have been distributed all over the world since the pharaohs. So it's very difficult to I don't know how to go back to history 4,000 years and say only the bees that live in Italy or in the Mediterranean area. And these bees have been selected. For example, I have a breeds of bee called Saskatraz. They have been developed in Canada. They've been selected to be able to withstand cold. So even if you would take them to Italy, maybe now the Saskatraz would find Italy too hot and they would die. So it's very difficult once you have modified an animal. So people see human as being very cruel because they take wild animals and through a process of domestication, we change them. We change them so much that we made the wolf to become a dog. But this happens in nature. We have ants who domesticated, if I can't find another word, aphids. Aphids is an animal that has no defense and totally relies on the ants. The ants use the aphids the same way we use the chickens or we use the cow. They provide assistance, they provide food for the aphids, they defend them if they are attacked. They take the aphid literally and they bring them into their house or where the ants live. So this symbiotic and collaboration between species have always existed, and it's not exclusive to us.
Very, very, very interesting. Thank you, Isabella. I read that you are also collaborating with students at Parsons School of Design to create fashion using wools from rare breeds of sheep. Can you tell us?
Yes, so we had a big program that unfortunately is in a pause right now because of the COVID-19. I realized that the student might work with wool, but they've never seen a sheep, or they never know what kind of sheep. You know, there is also a lot of breeds of different sheep. We have different wool. You'll use a different breed of a sheep if you want to weave a carpet, or if you want to do a sweater, or if you want to do a blanket. They're just different animals that have different coats, and that's what you select. And I thought it would have been fun, because I worked in fashion, for the student, and they did came last September to my farm, and I called some local farmers, and they brought the sheep, and they brought also rabbits, because there is Angora wool, you know, that comes from the Angora rabbit. And the students were so enthusiastic to dip their hands into the animal fur and see what it was at the origin, and how this animal, how do you spin it? How do you take the hair from the animals? And so I wanted to create a collection of maybe a herd of 10 sheep, but all of different breeds, so that the Parsons schools and other people, but it was in collaboration with the Parsons, could come and have a direct understanding of the sources of where the wool comes from. So we're still doing it, but I still have to collect my 8 lambs, which I was hoping to collect from different farms this spring, but now we can't do it. So we'll see, it's postponed for the moment.
Okay, we'll be waiting to see some some dresses.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, Tess asks, can you describe to us your typical day at the farm?
Well, it starts very early. I wake up very early. I generally naturally wake up around 5:30, 6 o'clock. But I don't go out until probably around 7 when I open the chickens. Now, we open, of course, in the winter, it might be later. You open the animals when there is light, because you don't want predator like raccoons or coyotes to come at night. They are more active at night, the predators. So as soon as there is light, you let them out. You feed them, you give them food, you give them water. I have a person that works with me. His name is Margherita. So me and Margherita take care of the chickens. We have chickens and ducks and turkeys. And we have a few goats, but the goats, they were just given to me as a present. So I say they are my gardeners. Supposedly goats eat everything, and so we use them to eat weeds. But you know what? Sometimes they don't eat all the weeds. They eat some, and some they leave out because they don't like the taste. So I still have to go and garden and clear the weeds. So my day starts like this. You don't attend the bees every day, but you might go every 2 weeks to see that the hives are doing well, that they are healthy, that there hasn't been any pests. The raw mite is a very big problem with the bees. Right now, one of my queen died, and I received a call from one of my volunteers saying, I picked up a new queen, I have it in my pocket. Can I meet you at the farm to put the new queen in the hive? But I couldn't come because I'm here with you. So a friend of mine went to help and put the new queen. So these are my activities. So it's very active in the morning and then very active in the evening, where we have to put the animals back. We feed them and then put them away. We attend their health with vaccines. There are mites right now. So there is a chicken who has her legs affected by mites. So you have to dip their legs into mineral oil. That is very messy. So generally it doesn't take long, but it takes long to catch the chickens. Who knows that I'm there to try to catch her. The operation of dipping her legs in the oil is not so long, but it takes a long time then to clean up because it splashes the oil everywhere. And then sometimes there is more busy. On Friday and Saturday, we do the distribution to our 50 members. And because they cannot come to the farm, right now we are all in quarantine, me and my daughter do the distribution. So I have 25 addresses, she has 25 addresses, and we go to all of them and bring our packages of food.
Well, a question from Sally. Today is Earth Day.
Yes.
What would you like people to think about today, especially that we are having this rebirth of going back to the Earth, yet we still have so much to learn?
Yes, we still have so much to learn. For me, I really, I mean, when I was in school, it was animal behavior and conservation. And I always said that I really loved the animal behavior more than the conservation, because the conservation, of course, talks about endangered species and climate change and animals that are disappearing. It's all very bad news all the time. It always depressed me. And instead, animal behavior gave me the love for nature and the wonderment, you know, of these intricacies, complicated and yet simple, and it's all connected. And as you learn and you live with them, you just find the connection, and all the dots connect. So I love the wonderment, because I also feel that once you enjoy nature, you want to protect it. I mean, even now with the COVID, I find it, you know, in social media, the waters in Venice are transparent. We can see the bottom of the canals. The air is clean. In Rome, they hear the fountains and the birds singing. I think we have forgotten it. And when they're coming back, you fall in love with them and you want to preserve them.
Talking about Italy, I know that you go to Italy at least once a year. And
yes,
you also,
yes.
Even more, yeah. And you go, among other things, you go and visit Sandro Petrini, the founder of Slow Food in Piedmont. Do you have any project going on together?
Well, he does do a big gathering, a virtual gathering through the internet on April 25th, which is the Italian Liberazione, the end of Second World War. And he does it in support of all the doctors and all the medical staff that is helping Italy with this virus, which Italy and New York, of course, have been hit very, very badly. So I have been in touch with Sandro to support his initiative for fundraising to help Italy. I went to visit his university. It's an incredible place. It's near Torino in the northern Italy. All the lessons are in English, by the way. If any of people that are following are interested, you can take courses. You can take a 2 years master degree on cooking, on sustainability, on organic farming. It's extraordinary. And one of the things that I'll give you an example. One of the things that touched me the most is when I visited him and he showed me his, where they keep the wine, the cellar. And not only there were the collection of wine, but next to the wine, there was a collection of the soil. The quality of the soil, it was give flavor to the wine, to the grapes, to any of the vegetable. And I've never seen a cellar where the sample of the earth were next to the wine, because the connection and the understanding that flavor comes from that. Yes, it also comes from the quantity of sun and how much it rains, but the soil is the great mystery, because in modern farming, the soil is tilled and abused, and then you put chemicals and you work at it as if it is a kind of just a place to hold the plants. But in organic farm, the soil is what you work on.
Yes, thank you. A question from Laura La Posta, who is a journalist with Il Sole 24 Ore. Hi, Laura, and specializing in sustainability. She asks, as the United Nations organization said today, one new infection disease emerges in humans every 4 months. 75% of these emerging diseases are from animals. Biological diversity makes it difficult for pathogen to spread rapidly, but it is estimated that around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinctions. It seems that if we fight climate change and biodiversity, this will help not just nature, but human health. Do you agree?
What will help human health if we don't? I mean, what will help human health is not to eat wildlife, you know, because wildlife, we control the animal that are domesticated at the farms, and we check on them all the time. So we have a control of the health of the animals. But to my understanding, this COVID-19 came from farming in China, where wild animals were caught and sold. I think it comes from bats. And some wild animals, they might develop pathogen, and then we eat them, or they come into, sometimes eating it doesn't really affect you because our gastric juice can kill everything, but it's while they are at the farm, at the market, that are in contact with other live animals and people, that's where the infection could take place. And yes, there has been an incredible push, and actually, if anyone wants the best information is about the Bronx Zoo. The Bronx Zoo is an extraordinary zoo, WCS, is a zoo that half of the money that they collect goes to take care of the collection of animals. And 50% of the budget is to assist research in the wildlife in Africa, in Asia, in America. And they have just done an incredible conference saying it's time to stop outlaw the consumption of wild animals, because this is where most of the diseases come from, whether it was the avian flu or it was this. So it would be a good idea. I don't know much about it because I work in farms, and I don't work in, you know, diseases of wild animals, but yes, it would be best just to eat farm animals.
By the way,
good. That's the other thing. Farm animal, but give them a good life, not keep them in cages all day without any movement, as big, or sometimes these big, incredible, enormous farms. They don't have room. The demand of meat is superior to the space we have, so the animal suffer quite a lot.
Yeah, talking about the Bronx Zoo, they have a wonderful Instagram account where you see a lot of small short videos that are really beautiful.
Really, I have to follow it. I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. Another question from another colleague, Davide Mamone. Hi. What does Isabella think about the latest Giorgio Armani's proposal to leave the fast fashion approach in order to embrace a more traditional way of doing fashion and thinking about future collections? Can this help environment and earth as well?
So I'm not familiar with what Giorgio Armani said recently, and I will check it out. I'm very interested. Of course, there has been a very strong movement on food. And as we said, you know, organic food has become more and more popular. a lot of fashion has the same problem as polluting the earth, whether it's dyes or the way cotton is cultivated or wool, and yet it's not confronted as much. That's why I took this initiative with the Parsons School of Design. It was in a way to address the problem of bringing value of conservation and being environmentally responsible also in fashion. But the biggest hero, the biggest person that does that is Stella McCartney. Stella McCartney, her collection is all, she couldn't care less if the hem should be above the knee or below the knee. It's not about that. It's all about how to create fashion that is beautiful and it's fun to wear, but it doesn't have this darkness and unspoken secrets of polluting or creating some damage to the environment. So she is my greatest hero, Stella.
Right. A question from Matteo. Organic food remains something for the elite, privileged people who can or want to pay the difference. What can we do, and what can someone of your stature, Isabella, do to support the idea that we have to transition to more sustainable practices?
Okay, so I know the argument against organic food, that it is elitist because it's more expensive. It's much more expensive to produce organically than with in a big industrial farming where you put pesticides, that. So yes, the more demand there is on organic food, the more the prices will come down, because that's the law of the market. And we've seen that. Nowadays, for example, I think the majority of people probably buy organic milk. You may not have in your kitchen everything that it is organic, but there are certain products like free-range eggs that comes from chickens that are free-range, or organic milk. So little by little, there are certain products that become so desirable or organic that their prices fall. And the other thing is, I think when it comes to meat, we don't have to eat it twice a day. We might have to eat it a little less. This is what I always say to our clients who say, oh, but your products are expensive. I say, yes, but you might have to eat chicken. We don't slaughter our chicken, but we collaborate with other farms. So if our client wants to have meat, we put them in touch and we distribute their meat and their cheeses too. So I always say, well, maybe it's enough to eat it twice a year. But again, I don't want to talk like somebody who is a doctor who knows about medicine, who knows about how to resolve the problem of the world. I read like you read this problem, and I feel that I do my farm because I find it tremendously enjoyable to be seeing nature from so up close. And it has been one of the experiences in my life that gave me most knowledge about chemistry, about life, about evolution. It was so hard to read Darwin, and then all of a sudden I have the animals there and the vegetables, and they're all part of, they all are following the laws of evolution, and everything became so simple. And that for me is the great pleasure, and the great pleasure of being of such great assistance to my community. For example, one of the things that we do that I am delighted, just came to me 2 days ago. I'm about to receive 80 new baby chicks. They're coming in 2 weeks. And I called the people that are members of my farm. A lot of them have small children. They're all quarantining. And I said, could you help me raise the chickens with your children? So I can bring you 4 or 5 chicks. I'll bring you the food. I'll bring you the water. You just have to change the paper where they are and help them, keep them warm. Everybody responded with such great enthusiasm. So at least the quarantine for my friend on the farm is going to be for 4 or 5 days or a week, a little joyful. We're going to do a Zoom connection with the chickens at the farm so they can see what are we doing. And all this to me is the reason why I do it. I do know that I'm part of the big picture of the world. Why do we have to buy organic? Is it more expensive? it becomes a class problem. I understand all that, but I don't have an answer. I follow the discussion, but I find it hard to participate with knowledge. With the knowledge that I have is the pleasure that it gives me and that I am given to my neighbors.
Fantastic. One very, very last question from Francine. Francine says that she loved your book, My Chickens and I. Are you working on another book? And I had also my question, before the COVID-19, you were touring Europe and the US with your latest show, Link
Yes.
Link Circus. Are you going to resume the show, and what are your other projects?
I'm booked with the show. I'm booked with the show again in the spring, not March of 2021, when we hope it will be open. I think there will be a little problem. I think that cinemas and theater might be the last one to open because we always need a crowd. I am currently working with the Musée d'Orsay on with a fantastic Italian woman called Laura Bossi, who is the curator of an exhibit on Darwin. And I'm creating 2 shows about Darwin that I will perform at the Musée d'Orsay Theater. And if there is a problem, we were supposed to do it in October. For the moment, it's been postponed into November. And if there is a problem, I am also making an online version. And I've been already in touch with Harvard and Princeton. And it seems to me that my life has now become more touring the university and then occasionally going to a theater. But we'll see. I mean, maybe the university will be better organized for the internet, for this communication like tonight, what we're going to do. Theaters still have to find a way to resolve, especially the live performance is difficult to bring in.
And books and movies?
Books, Lothar Schirmer from Schirmer Mosel, who is my original publisher, does all my books, and occasionally they came up in other languages, including Italian or French or English. But Lothar is German, and we've done 5 books together, and he's a great fan of my drawings. So I am right now doing drawings of in a way, I don't know, my projects sometimes start not with they start organically, as we say. So I take little notes of the funny episodes that happen every day at my farm, and I try to draw them. And maybe we'll do a book that it is a drawing book with a little diary of the little things that happen. For example, a turkey adopted a baby chickens. And it was so charming to see this love between 2 different species.
Okay, thank you so much, Isabella. I know that we ran out of time. We still have many more questions, but we don't want to abuse your time.
Well, thank you so much, because because we don't have any help, I have to cook for the family. Dinner.
Great. Have a great evening. Thank you again for your time, and see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, we go on with our conversation with Maureen Kline. So from La Fattoria to the Factory. You know that in Italy, farm is a fattoria, which sounds like factory, but it's not. Maureen Kline, let me pick up. Okay, Maureen Kline is the Vice President for Public Affairs and Sustainability of Pirelli North America. She's also a board member of the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, a member of the Corporate Responsibility Steering Committee of the Automotive Industry Action Group, and many other things. She writes a column on sustainability for Inc.com. She also co-teaches a course called Enterprise Sustainability within the Clarkson University's Engineering Management Master's Program. Maureen has lived in Italy, in Milan, for over 20 years, working first as a journalist for Wall Street Journal, Breaking News, Business Week, and then she started working for Pirelli from Milan. So, Maureen, you are also half Italian, aren't you?
Well, I'm honored to be an Italian citizen. So I lived in Italy so long that I applied for citizenship, and I was happy to receive it.
Great. Pirelli is a very famous brand. It's an old company. Its origin dates back to 1872. Can you imagine? When Giovanni Battista Pirelli founded a small company, Pirelli NC in Milan, to produce elastic rubber items. Today, Pirelli makes tires for both consumers and racing cars and bikes. It is the exclusive tire supplier for Formula One, so probably it's one of the most famous things that Pirelli does. And it employs more than 30,000 people in the world. So, Maureen, tires are made of rubber. Is it synthetic rubber made from petroleum oil?
Well, I think it was a lot more fun to talk about heirloom tomatoes and dipping chicken's legs in mineral oil. But over to tires. So yes, so tires are made of renewable and non-renewable ingredients. Rubber, I don't know whether everyone knows, but rubber comes from trees, kind of like maple syrup. The trees then replenish the rubber, so that is a renewable product. They grow in Southeast Asia mainly, but we have a mix of, and the thing about natural rubber is that you absolutely do need it in tires, because so far, you know, man has not been able to replicate the properties of natural rubber. But we have a mix of ingredients, and over time we have a lot of work being done by engineers in the R&D department to improve the mix and the performance of that mix, and also to make it more environmentally friendly. So, you know, obviously the most important thing is safety. You know, the 4 tires are holding up a lot of weight, and they're the only thing between the vehicle and the road. And so, and you mentioned Formula One. The Formula One drivers are essentially, they're putting their lives in our hands, you know, in a way. So we really have a strong responsibility in terms of our R&D and making those tires very, very safe.
Yeah, well, going back to your job, you are Vice President for Sustainability. Can you explain what does sustainability mean for a factory?
Sure, and I was, you know, I think it's interesting that you set up this contrast between the farm and then the corporate sustainability, and we did have some questions about Earth Day. So corporate sustainability has really evolved a lot, and I think it's worth spending some time on what is it, what does sustainability mean in a corporate environment. First of all, it is not only environmental, so it's environmental, social, and governance. And so governance would be things like ethics and anti-corruption. Social would be things like human rights. And then, of course, you need to have economic sustainability. You mentioned that Pirelli was founded in 1872, so it's you know, it's lasted a long time. So that is also sustainability, creating jobs, and you know, and making sure that the finances are in order. But corporate sustainability grew out of, I would say, sort of 2 directions. One was from environmental compliance, and then on the other side there was this concept of corporate social responsibility, so that corporations needed to be involved in the community and do good things and so on for their reputation. And those things have come together, and now I think sustainability is becoming very, very important and front and center in strategy for corporations, partly because businesses have a lot of power, and they, you know, they're in a position to do something about creating a more equitable society and responding to some of the environmental issues. And sustainability really is creating a cultural shift from a model that was based on almost entirely on generating profits for shareholders to a model where you're really creating value for all stakeholders. So, so in the case of Pirelli, we're looking at suppliers, we're looking at customers, we're looking at our employees, and the environment itself is a stakeholder. And I think Isabella, when she talked about fashion, alluded to the the broader picture, the fact that the costs of that a company has are not just financial, but but they're environmental and there are social costs. And so the practice of sustainability is really to broaden that perspective and to look at all of those areas.
Yeah, as a journalist, you followed Italian companies. Can you say that Italian companies have a tradition in sustainability?
I think they do. And actually, when I moved from Italy to New York in 2012, I immediately noticed that in the UN, in the business part of the UN, which is called the UN Global Compact, the Italian companies were really taking the lead. And I'm not sure why the tradition, although I would say, you could link it to the traditions of taking care of employees that go way back. I mean, Pirelli in the early days used to have summer camps for the children of the employees and sports for the employees and so on. So there was this tradition of kind of taking care of people, and maybe it goes back to the artisanal traditions and being close to nature, being appreciative of nature. I'm not sure, maybe you have other ideas about why that is.
No, really not. But talking now again about Pirelli and its sustainability policy, I read that 10 years ago or so, Pirelli launched Cinturato P7, the first high-performance tire based on a, quote, green philosophy. What does a green philosophy mean for tires?
Well, so one of the things that you can do in sustainability is a life cycle assessment of your products. And so you can look at the environmental impacts of a product from the beginning, from the raw materials, and then to the factory, what's the environmental impact there, to the product when it's in use, and then to the end of life of the product. And you can map out those environmental impacts and decide where you need to intervene and take action. And the most of the environmental impact of a tire is when it's on a car in the use phase. And so of course it's very important to make the tires more fuel efficient, but they have to be safe. And so, as I said before, and so it's all about balance. And we like to say sustainability is all about balance, but balancing fuel efficiency, fuel economy, which is also good for the pocketbook, of course. But it's making tires that can allow the car to have lower emissions. Mm-hmm. And so we call that eco safety, right? So in terms of being able to sell tires that are both safe and environmentally friendly. That's kind of what the philosophy is. And then we also look at the materials, and we're constantly working on improving the materials in terms of environmental, both the performance of the tire and the environmental impact. And so we look at not only natural rubber, but rice husk as an alternative to silica is another one. And there's a lot of research going on into natural and renewable materials that we could use in tires.
Yeah, talking about materials, I understand that you want to use more and more natural rubber for making the tires. Can you explain why and what is the impact of this of this strategy on the environment in the countries where the rubber is made, natural rubber is made?
Right. So, well, what we want is to increase the amount of renewable materials. So that could be natural rubber, but it's really different types of renewable materials. I mentioned the rice husk, and there's research going on into different plants that can also produce rubber, although it's in smaller quantities. But so we're looking at alternatives to natural rubber that are still natural. But one of the aspects of corporate sustainability is to set goals and then to track your progress and try to improve. And so one of the goals that we set has to do with increasing the amount of renewable materials. We also have very aggressive goals in terms of carbon neutral by 2030, which is quite a bit earlier than a lot of companies are aiming for, and we're working on getting our electricity from renewable sources by 2025, which is very soon.
Yeah, but can you tell us more about this natural rubber?
Sure.
It is harvested in mostly in Indonesia, right? And one question is there are there any bad consequences that we don't want to have, like increasing deforestation, for example?
Yeah, so for all agricultural products, actually, there is this issue of, as the world's population grows and demand increases, there are issues of natural forests being cut down to make way for agriculture. And that's true for palm oil, and that's true for beef, and that's an issue that's been raised also for natural rubber trees. So in other words, there, this tendency to possibly cut down natural forests in order to make way to plant more trees. So what Pirelli has done, because we do see this as a problem, and it's not the only problem. I mean, when you have a supply chain that is very long, let's say, with a lot of intermediaries in between the raw material, and by the time it gets to us, it's been through a lot of hands. So there are a lot of issues, and so the first thing that we need to do is to be able to trace our supply chain, to know what's going on the ground. First of all, is there deforestation? Second of all, are there any human rights abuses? Are the farmers earning a living wage? And so on. And so what we did was we actually, Pirelli worked on two fronts. One is our own policy and working with our suppliers. And then the other front was to try to get the whole industry to respond together and create a roundtable for sustainable natural rubber and work collaboratively with our competitors, because the problem is so big that we want to make sure that everybody is on board to solve it. But the work that was done on Pirelli's own sustainable rubber policy was actually very interesting, because we brought all the stakeholders together. And so we brought Indonesian farmers, we brought some of the car companies that we sell to, the whole value chain. We got everyone into a room, and we basically hashed out what are the best ways to get to a place where we're not going to have deforestation, and we're going to have all these other benefits, and we can trace our progress. And so we came up with a policy that has 12 pillars. So it's very, very vast, and it includes community building, things like that, and biodiversity, and zero deforestation, and so on. And we also, within that policy, we talked about the importance of using less materials to have the same productivity. And so so Pirelli itself committed to making tires that are lighter, that use less materials. And the approach is to have our suppliers work on all of these principles and then come back to us with a roadmap every year and report on their progress. And so that over time, we can hope to get the whole supply chain mapped out and see what's really happening.
Yeah, you mentioned your goal for carbon emissions. What does it mean for a factory in practice? That you use alternative energy sources, or what else?
Yeah, so actually, I believe Pirelli's been very creative in terms of the carbon action plan. Most of our factories are fairly new, and we have different types of energy sources. So in Italy, we have a cogeneration plant, which is using plant-based materials to produce electricity. And in Mexico, we purchase electricity. We purchase wind energy, so we have a lot of renewable energy there. We have solar panels that are actually third-party owned solar panels, both in Georgia here in the United States and in Settimo Torinese in Italy. And we're really working on that renewable energy sourcing. We also have already very clean factories. So the emissions of the factories are very low, very clean. And most of the factories run on natural gas, which is not a renewable source, but it's fairly clean energy. So over time, the idea is to improve.
Yeah. Well, Italian companies are also leader in technologies and innovations. And I read that recently Pirelli launched the first cyber tire and became the first tire manufacturer to transfer data from a smart tire over a 5G network during a vehicle technology event. Can the cyber tire talk to the driver? How does it work?
Well, I think the last thing we need is more of our, inanimate objects talking to us, right, with a humanoid voice. But yeah, so I would say that a lot of the big tire companies are working on the idea of, as the car companies work on autonomous vehicles, we're gonna be looking at lots of situations where you have sensors communicating information to the vehicle, and so Pirelli was early on working on collecting information on road conditions through a sensor in the tires that could be transmitted into the vehicle's electronics. And we recently did do this pilot with 5G, which is very promising. But it's interesting to think about if you have a fleet of cars or trucks, and you need to manage all of the tires on the fleet from your smartphone, and you can see which ones need to be pumped up with air, and both for safety and for fuel efficiency. That's very helpful, and that's actually a sustainability benefit.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little about coronavirus.
Okay.
Pirelli has 3 factories in China. Can you tell us if they are working now and how they adjusted the way they work after the coronavirus? I think it's very interesting for American companies, Italian companies, every company that are trying to go back to work.
Yeah, so Pirelli actually, being both in China and in Italy, obviously had a really, a close view of the whole, the whole evolution of the pandemic, and how to deal with it, and both in terms of shutting down factories and then now in terms of starting up factories, and so the company took very seriously the health and safety protocol, and and it's very centralized. So in Milan, where the headquarters are, we really have an eye on, we have a set of principles about what it would take to have a factory working safely. So, you know, you can do things like measure the temperature of people coming into the factory. You can have frequent cleaning, sterilization, have people placed far apart from each other, and then also the protective equipment and the, you know, and the things that they're wearing, the masks and so on. And so we've got a very strict protocol, and as we look to, you know, opening up factories, that will be applied. I was also thinking about the pandemic because, you know, people don't really associate the coronavirus with sustainability, but a lot of sustainability is about managing risk, and a pandemic is actually a social risk. And so, you know, it's caught us with all of our vulnerabilities, right? Both, you know, the economic system and business and so on. And so if we want to think about a sustainable future, we, you know, we need to think about managing that type of risk more and more, and, you know, and about our responsibility to our people. But I also think that the coronavirus has given everyone in the sustainability community, like kind of like Isabella was saying, you know, people are going, that the water in Venice is clearer, and people are sort of feeling a little bit back to nature, even though we're stuck in our homes. But it's a pause for reflection, and a lot of people are saying, do we want to rebuild in a greener way? You know, do we want to rebuild in a way that is more sustainable, that has more attention to the environment, but also to inclusiveness of people and, you know, and human rights? Because I think this is a moment when people are coming, despite a lot of the political polarization, people are really coming together. And sustainability is also about community building.
Mm-hmm. And are you talking about this at Pirelli? I mean, how you can improve your strategy?
Well, we do always look to the future. I mean, we always look at future scenarios. We look at what's happening with future mobility, you know, shared driving, and so on. In this particular moment, I think, like everybody, we're rolling up our sleeves and we're looking at how to pay the bills, you know, which is absolutely, it's a very scary time from that perspective. But I think that our sustainability strategy remains intact, and you know, it'll be interesting to see how quickly we can get back to work on that.
Is the Georgia factory here in America open?
Next Monday it will be starting slowly, a slow reopening. So we're going to have 2 lines opening out of 5. So yeah, it will be reopening.
How many people does it employ? Do you know?
It's an interesting factory, and you know, you're welcome to come visit. It's a highly robotized factory. So we have these fascinating robots that are, you know, like picking up the tire and putting it over here, and, you know, like in a science fiction movie. And so really the workers that we have are machine operators, and they're skilled engineers, and they're working the machines, and they're not really too close together. So it's not a typical assembly line factory.
So it's not mostly blue collars, but it's more.
It's well, they're blue collar because they're in the factory floor, but they're not. But they're specialized, and it's not an assembly line. So actually, the number of people is not. It's not one of the. It's not one of the factories with the most people, but it's highly skilled people.
Yeah. Well, last year, today is Earth Day, we know, and last year you wrote an article for Inc.com with the headline, How to Make an Impact on Earth Day. And your first suggestion was, and I quote, consume less, use products longer, share things, and limit your waste, unquote. Do you think that people will do that after the coronavirus? And if so, companies will sell less products, and what impact that will have, on business, on the economy?
Yeah, I know it sounds strange for someone working for a consumer goods company to say consume less. I think, but I do think that one of the sort of the conundrums or the contradictions in sustainability is that we do realize that we need to learn to live within planetary boundaries, right? And so one of them is climate change, but there are others like the ozone, you know. So we need to have production and consumption that does not go beyond our planetary boundaries. And one of the things that companies are thinking about is how to. I mentioned making lighter tires that are using less material, right? So that's not consuming less. I think in the case of tires, people will always consume what they need and not more and not less. You know, you're not going to buy more tires than you need. You're not going to buy less tires than you need either. So, but we could imagine a future where the cars are used in a more efficient way. And so instead of each family owning a couple of cars in the United States, we might have a situation where there's a self-driving car that maybe is owned by you, and it drives you to your office, and then it acts like an Uber or Lyft, and it goes and does other work during the day until you're ready to be picked up again. And in that case, you know, there might be an opportunity to sell tires instead of by the unit. We could sell tires by the miles, and that, you know, it's kind of like it could be an incentive to provide exactly the amount of tires that are needed, and you know, and have them put to the right use, right? And so that's a little bit different, but it is something that people are thinking about. New business models where instead of just consume, we're thinking about things like sharing and renting, and you know, and selling a service rather than a product, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole automotive industry is thinking about that. To become a more mobile service industry than just make
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for this year, for this Earth Day, do you have any other advice and any other recommendations?
Well, I did write a column for this Earth Day, and I did talk about the fact that, you know, this could be a pause for reflection to think about how we want to build, you know, our economy going forward. But one of the things that I mentioned in that column that I really love is not my idea at all, but it was I quoted from a guy named Bill McDonough, who wrote a book a long time ago called Cradle to Cradle, and he's considered one of the fathers of the circular economy, which means, you know, using and reusing, and instead of just using once, disposing, and so on. So recycling is part of that, but it's also, you know, just the whole concept of, again, you know, not overusing our resources. So in any case, he said that if you think about toxins, things that are toxic, it's really not that they're bad necessarily, but that they're in the wrong place. And so he gives the example of, you don't give a hammer to a child, but a hammer is good in a construction site. And so if we think about carbon, we want to get the carbon into the soil where it belongs, and it doesn't belong in excess quantities in the atmosphere. So, so I mentioned that in the article, and I think it's something that's good to think about. If we can think about balance, and it goes back in a way to what you were saying about, you and Isabella were talking about the bats as the source of the wild animals. You know, we should not be eating wild animals. That's something that's out of place. The pathogens are there, but but something has not disturbed that and made it, you know, out of place or out of balance. Right.
Right. Yeah, we have a question from the audience, Laura La Posta again. Maureen, is it there a bias in the general public about industry for not being sustainable because sustainability is a cost and pollution is free? Half of Pirelli turnaround comes from green products created by R&D, Research and Development Department, to reduce the ecological footprint. Is Pirelli an exception, or the common feeling is not updated?
Well, thank you for that. And I know Laura knows a lot about Pirelli's sustainability, so I appreciate that. So yeah, you mentioned the cost of polluting. Polluting right now is free, but Pirelli is one of the things that we absolutely are in favor of is carbon pricing. We've been saying that for many years. I think that I think a lot of companies. I'm actually pretty hopeful about companies coming on board with sustainability, because when people, first of all the young people, I get a lot of young people asking me about sustainability as a career, because you know everybody wants to go into sustainability, everybody wants to change the world, and it's exciting. It's one of the most exciting things we have. I think it's a good. The reason I think it's so important right now is I think it's a good model for our economic system, you know, to make a better world. So I think Pirelli has emerged as a leader in sustainability. It's nothing to do with me. It's the sustainability team in Milan that is absolutely fantastic, doing a great job, and so we do tend to be an award-winning company in sustainability. But I do think that it's catching on, and I see a lot of enthusiasm in other companies as well.
Great. Another question from Sally. If the Pirelli factory will gradually reopen in Georgia, is Pirelli not concerned that this can be dangerous? What precaution is Pirelli taking not to sacrifice lives for the sake of commerce? You already explained some of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is to take all those precautions. I mean, I think we have a very, very serious program for you know, protective gear and you know, and distancing and monitoring temperatures and so on. And I think, I mean, I think it'll be obviously up to the governments to provide more testing and so on, but I think it's, you know, it's something that actually the whole automotive industry is looking at, you know, how and when do you ramp up slowly, and how do you get the supply chain actually to be aligned, because there's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you don't want to have the automobile factory waiting for a part and it's not coming and so on. But certainly saving lives is the number one priority, absolutely, and we would not do something that was risky.
Right. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. I don't know if you, Maureen, want to add anything. I think they have covered.
I think this has been fun. I particularly enjoyed listening to Isabella, because you know, life on a farm is it's great, and I do think that we need more organic farming. So that was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Thank you to all of you who followed us. I hope there will be other occasions like this, because it's really entertaining and great to have these conversations also virtually online. And thank you again, and see you soon.